Hi everyone, welcome to this fortnightly Tools for Frontline Staff session. We've got one speaker today, which is Taylan from Day-Mer. So I'm going to pass across to Taylan shortly, and then after some time for question and answers, we'll have an open discussion and a chance for everyone to share any work that they're doing. But for now, I'm going to pass across to Taylan. Thanks for coming along.
Thank you, John. I'm going to get my presentation up. I don't know if you can help with that, but let's see if I can do it first. Then we'll try our luck. Let's see. Windows. Let's see.
I've got them open if you want me to share them, but
would you be so kind as to?
Yeah, no worries.
I'm working on a temperamental computer.
No problem. Let me just get them up. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and really pleased to be here. I have a long presentation, but it's a generic presentation. So I will whisk through most of it. But I just wanted to talk a bit about the communities to situate our work, as it were. It's, as I said, a generic training session we have prepared and that we provide to different local authorities, professionals, health services, etc. If we can go to the second, it concerns demographic information about Hackney's Kurdish, Turkish Cypriot communities, about the unique contribution they make, and I also talk about information gaps about these communities, and I provide very hands-on tips about how to engage with them. As I said, any information communicated, I think, is a success, and in that way we are doing our job of promoting community rights. So next slide, please. Yeah, I will talk about definitions, who we are talking about in terms of ethnic groups and social groups. I'll talk about language, religion a bit, and I will touch upon their current social needs. And I'll talk about community life, and I will talk a bit about community organizations and the work they do. Next slide, please. So who are we talking about? We usually refer to people as one community, as Turkish community, but actually these people are made up of three different ethnicities: Kurdish, Turkish, and Turkish Cypriot people. Why are they considered Turkish in itself? It's because they share a language and a culture, and Turkish is the vernacular, the official language they use, so there is good reasons for that perception as well. There is different reasons why they live in this country, usually refugee asylum seeking communities, and that relates to the Cyprus question, the Kurdish national question, the question of repression of some faith minorities in Turkey, which really happens after the 1982 coup in Turkey. Next slide, please. Yeah, just want to give you a sense of what we are talking about. Britain is there looking like a dinosaur, and Turkey is in green with Cyprus down there. Next slide, please. This is a bigger map of Turkey. Just to point out very quickly, in terms of migration from Turkey, two waves happen. One in late 80s or early 90s, and one after the 2016 military a coup that happened, which the government used to repress also Democrats, academics, and there was a batch of people coming. Whereas the people who came earlier are from the right side of the map, the people who came after 2016 are from big centers like Istanbul, Ankara, etc. And they're into their organic aubergine sandwiches and all that. Bad joke, sorry. Next slide, yeah. And this is Cyprus. The northern side is the Turkish part, but there's a sizable Greek Cypriot community in Hackney and in North London too. Next slide, please. And Kurds, a stateless nation, are divided between 4 countries, and that's the areas where they are usually found. I am from more or less that place that is under the Y of Turkey, if you're wondering. But yeah, that's also about the Kurds as well. Next slide, please. As I said, influx happened in late 80s, early 90s, and some after the July 2016 coup. There's less people coming since Brexit because there was treaties between Britain and the EU that enabled Turks, Kurds, people from Turkey to arrive on business visas. The community is estimated to be about 250k to 350k in total, and at least 20,000 we think live in Hackney. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the history, some communities have a longer history. The Turkish and Greek Cypriots had a link with British colonialism and you know, and that history, so they came earlier. But with Turkish Cypriots, they arrive after 1974, when the island is partitioned between Greek and Turkish sides, as it were. Next slide, please. I did talk about this a bit, but I'm just looking to see if there is anything else to be said, but I'm happy to share this. As I said, a refugee migrant community that comes to Britain, usually either because of Kurdish national question, the civil rights issues, or faith groups and their repression issues. And the latest influx before the 2016 was in late 80s, early 90s. Next slide, please. They are mostly the community we have in Hackney is a part of a community that's spread around North London, Hackney, Haringey, Islington and Enfield, but there are pockets in Waltham Forest, Barnet and in Lewisham. In Lewisham there are more Turkish Cypriots, and in terms of the spread around the borough, they are all around the borough, but especially on the west of the borough in the wards like Stoke Newington, Clissold, Newington Green and around Dalston. And they also have strong business activity in Green Lanes that also stretches into Haringey. Next slide, please. If we look at these distributions, let me see. Turks and Kurds, especially in boroughs of Enfield, Haringey and Hackney, are densely populated. This is information that's gleaned from 2021 census. This actually also shows that Turkish Kurdish communities have been actually being pushed out and being moving further north into London, with the highest number of people registering themselves as Kurdish, Turkish or Turkish Cypriot being in Enfield with 32,000. Next slide, please. And it's interesting to see how they describe themselves in the ethnicity categories. I just provide that. I don't want to talk too much about it, but I just want to say a few things. At times, people don't register themselves as members of any of these communities because they have naturalized as British citizens. At times, they don't put themselves as Turkish or Kurdish because they think they're going to receive paperwork from officials in Turkish and Kurdish, and they have literacy issues. At times, ethnicity is not important for them. Faith is more important, so they wouldn't put themselves as Turkish, Kurdish, or Turkish Cypriot. As such, and given our experience, we think there is much more than 13,000 Turkish, Kurdish, or Turkish Cypriot people in Hackney. Next slide, please. Yeah, and if we look at it, the number of Turkish-born people in London has been steadily increasing. In 2011, this was about 59,000. It's currently 72,000, but in around UK, there's 125,000, but there are still more Americans than us. Next slide, please. Yeah. In terms of language, as I said, there is something that is unitary about these communities, but they do face language barrier. This relates to the history of communities, but also to integration, immigration policies, lack of ESOL provision, but also at times cultural sensitivity issues by service providers. There is still a bit of use of family and friends for translation, or even children from the family. People do speak Turkish publicly, but Kurdish is also spoken at home colloquially as a private language as well. I am, for example, a Kurdish Kurmanji speaker, but I'm not literate in it. That relates to the political background. So, but Kurdish communities speak a range of dialects, whereas you have Kurmanji speakers from Kurds from Turkey, Kurds from Iraq, for example, who can be found in Hammersmith, Ealing, Westminster. They speak a different dialect of Kurdish called Sorani. Next slide, please. And if you just to share, but just to make a few comments, as you can see in Enfield, Haringey, and Hackney and Islington, Turkish is one of the leading languages spoken, whereas Kurdish has a bit of a different status with less speakers in these areas, maybe more speakers, as you can see, in Westminster and in Ealing, because of the Iraqi Kurdish population there. Next slide, please. And the density, as I was saying, Turkish is third most spoken language, I think, in Hackney. Kurdish is still there, but it's not as high. And it's also in Haringey one of the most spoken language, whereas in Islington it's still there, but not so high in the list. Next slide, please. And just to talk a bit about religions, in general, Kurds and Turks are mostly Sunni Muslim. They are from Muslim Orthodoxy, and they do, as you can see, as you can witness, have special days and religious festivals, like the month of Ramadan, the Eid al-Fitr, the Eid al-Adha that happens and is celebrated. But actually, most people from Turkey who lives in London are from the religious alternative, the religious heterodoxy, the Shia group. But in Turkey, they're called Alevis. And most people are from these groups. Again, another thing is, for example, we talk about Kurdish, Turkish Cypriot communities, but we don't have much data, but our anecdotal experience and service experience is that 70% of people from Turkey are Kurdish, and they're Kurdish Alevis. And that also makes sense why they have emigrated here and took asylum. They also do have their rituals and their own special days. Rather than mosques, they have Cemevis. We used to have Cemevis in the back of Ridley Road Market, but because of high rent prices, etc., they moved to Haringey, and they do get quite used a lot for funerals, etc. Next slide, please. Yeah, and again, just a bit of smart Aleking about Alevi history, some notes. It relates to schisms, division, both in Islam 1,000 years ago, but also, issues of tribal and sectarian clashes that plighted the Ottoman history for the last 300-400 years. But as you can see, in Enfield and in Hackney and Haringey, there is still a sizable, very sizable Alevi community, and I've provided the data there too. Next slide, please. Yeah, just again, I'm not going to speak about all the points, but just want to say a few things about the social cultural life of communities. There are, the Kurdish community especially is what it is during weddings, funerals, and births, and they still do take up quite a bit of chunk of the social life. But there are Turkish concerts, social events that are happening. Traditionally, married women have needed to get their husband's permission to go out by themselves, but this has changed. But there is still domestic violence and domestic abuse issues within the communities. Bars and clubs are quite popular. They have linked to Turkish Kurdish TV. They're not sport oriented, but they are into their football. And there are also a lot of coffee shops and social clubs. There used to be more of these about 10-15 years ago in Dostum, but less so. In Haringey you can find, and there are also places where people connect and engage with other members of the community. And the community, obviously, having been here 30-35 years, have given rise to a second generation too. Next slide, please. The culture of the communities, there's a Turkish language ghetto in some respects. Community centers are quite vibrant and interact with the communities. But there is also other, special days people celebrate. Nowruz, which is the Kurdish New Year and start of spring, gets celebrated. This year there was a big do in Finsbury Park, but also celebration of the Turkish Republic by different parts of the community, just like religious festivities do happen as well. Next slide as well. Just to talk a bit about households. Still, the nuclear family is very much there. I did talk about public language and private language and register issues before. It is an aging community. There are, there is a high number of older people, and there is a fair amount of people getting looked after there by their families. They have Turks and Kurds, their houses is their castles, but in a whole different way, where hygiene, cleanliness of clinical proportions can be observed, taking off shoes, different ways of taking baths, different ways of behaving during funerals, which would be more somber, for example, as opposed to funerals as celebrations of one's lives that we see in Western cultures. I do provide some tips there. Do take your shoes off. Do praise the beautiful curtains if you ever find yourself in a Turkish house. Mother likely to be doing housework. They do interlink with neighbors. My mother was exchanging recipes for food with her Nigerian neighbor the other day, and they're quite into their Turkish soap operas, which are quite popular around the world, let me tell you. Some of our Day-Mer's Asian neighbors come and try to pick conversations about soap operas, about Ottoman life 500 years ago. But, this is Hackney. All kinds happen. Next slide, please. I'm going to whiz through the next few ones, but just want to talk about community problems, challenges in titles. Turkish Kurdish young kids, along with African and Caribbean kids, continue to be some of the lowest achievers. They used to be targets for ethnic minority achievement strategies and their mother tongue needs. So with young people, there is a sizable need group as well. there's still fair amount of unemployment and a concentration in unqualified areas, which we call the three C's: clean, cater, clothe, which Turks and Kurds do quite well. In terms of housing, there is housing issues. There is a high portion of people in social housing or in low quality housing. It is a community where there are, health issues that is shared with the general population. The community does have issues with discrimination and racism, and even though it is not to be exaggerated, there is frequent links of the community with crime culture as well. And there are problems of integration of the communities because of features, characteristics I talked about, where they are from, their level of education, and etc. If we can whiz through maybe this too. As I said, I don't want to take much time, but John, you're going to share these, so data is provided there, and I'm feeling a bit self-conscious that I'm talking too much already. Next one too, housing, and the next one too. One more. Just to talk about a bit from our recent services. Especially with the pandemic and cost of living crisis, there is more information, advice, guidance, and health information service related needs. We continue to see more women users. There are increased number of disabled clients and those with long-term health issues engaging with our services. Alongside welfare, housing, health, and immigration issues continue to be issues, but also mental health issues, about concerns about future, anxiety, stress, boredom, as well as clinical cases are on the rise. And we are continuing to get more referrals from especially health agencies that I've been sharing with colleagues. And there has been an increase in some of the problems the community sees vis-a-vis mental health, and the need for specialist services continue. Next slide, please. And the community is quite involved in community life, members of community. Since 2006 elections, there has been a batch of councillors elected. In Enfield North, the MP is a former Hackney councillor and is Kurdish. There is a lot of restaurants and small businesses which whose establishment helped the regeneration of Dalston, Newington Green, as well as Haringey and Tottenham in other boroughs. So they do make very much a contribution to the economic, social, and cultural life. And this includes community centers too. Next slide, please. There's a whole host of community organizations in North London from the community. Day-Mer is one of them, but among with Day-Mer, I think included mostly Hackney, or what used to be Hackney organizations there. You can look at them, and they all have different focuses. Derman's is health. Hackney Cypriot Association is more about Cypriots, whatever their ethnicity may be, as it were. Halkevi, which used to be based in the main road, now is in Dalston Lane, and they have a visible focus on Kurdish culture. Image is a women's organization. The Alevi Culture Center and the Refugee Workers Cultural Association used to be in Hackney, are no longer here. There's a Turkish Cypriot Community Association in Graham Road. But there is also, I just wanted to put this there, it includes organizations. There is a network of Turkish Kurdish organizations, about 30 organizations that are organized, and they do carry out campaigns about Turkey, usually. But there is also other religious and faith organizations, and I did put some of them, like the Aziziye Mosque, Süleymaniye Mosque. They're all Hackney-based mosques and madrasas. So just sharing that info. Next slide, please. What do we do? We were established in 1989. Day-Mer's founders include people who were involved in civil rights campaigns, issues, and persecution in Turkey. So we have more of an integration focus, not His Majesty's integration, unfortunately, a view of integration, of creation of conditions where people can live, work, and learn together, and we have been providing services according to evolving needs of the communities. Currently, our provision include legal advice services, social welfare advice, but also immigration advice, and we continue to see a high level of welfare housing cases, and we are concerned about the upcoming welfare reform. We do also had a history of running youth services, currently funded by Hackney Council as well, to run social cultural activities, a range of leadership activities as well. And we do organize autumn and Easter, excuse the background noise. We do organize residentials, which are about volunteering. We do have a supplementary education program, homework clubs, etc., which are largely subsidized by parents currently, both singly from time to time through mental health projects, through health projects. We do a lot of women's activities, which includes breakfast clubs, health information sessions, yoga, and arts classes recently. And we have a culture and arts program that runs throughout the year, and we organize a festival in first Sunday of every July, which takes place in Clissold Park. This year we're going to be organizing the 36th festival, the longest one in Hackney. Do come and see me, hunt me down, and I might be persuaded to give you a slice of watermelon. And also we've been doing a lot of migrant support campaigns, whether this is visiting Calais, doing migration-related meetings, supporting earthquakes and migrants campaigns, etc. Next slide, please. I just, having designed this with a view to talk to statutory officers, I just wanted to share, we wanted to share our views about what culturally sensitive services are. But just to pull out some main one from there, it's about both enabling services that are accessible, but also staffing that is accessible and working with communities. But the key there is to be aware of one's biases and to be as sensitive as possible. And if we can see, the communities are very much in tune with community life, the level of what can happen, what cannot happen, their expectations. I'll share that here as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, tips for engagement. I did talk about this. I'm not going to go too much into it. Having a constructive, friendly attitude, being patient, being direct and honest. Mother tongue by staff or community staff is always good. Being aware of bias is important. Being sensitive and having some kind of political training. For example, being able to distinguish matters of racism or racial insensitivity from matters of adapting to modernity is usually a good thing. Sometimes Turkish Kurdish people, for example, ask for Turkish interpreters or a staff in Turkish, and the council staff thinks that that's racist. It's not racist, it's because of an access issue, and at times, even if there is prejudices, racism is one thing, having prejudices is something else. So, you know, that attitude, that community engagement is important. Next slide, please. Yeah, among this one, I'll just leave it to you, but I'll just advise that you don't talk about your holiday in Bodrum or Kuşadası. The Turkish Kurdish people are likely to be from different parts of Turkey, and Bodrum and Kuşadası is a 90s thing anyway. Yeah, and talking about other foods than kebabs is important. Yeah, and as I said, don't forget to praise the plants and the exquisite curtains. Next slide, please. If you want, for the academically minded, some resources about Turkish Kurdish communities that I wanted to share. I'm not going to go through them. There is more added, but that does provide some information. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, and it's a generic thing. I'm happy to take questions if there is time for it, but our contact details are provided there. Sorry if I've spoken too much, and hopefully you found it useful, colleagues.
Thank you, Taylan. That was really, really informative. I feel like I'm now an expert, although that's probably completely inaccurate. But yeah, that was great. So much context, and yeah, we definitely got time for questions. And Gemma, you've got your hands up. Do you want to come in? You're still on mute, Gemma, if you're trying to speak. Gemma, are you there? Oh, there you go.
Sorry, I did that by mistake. I do apologise.
Okay. No worries. Does anyone, Jenny, did you want to come in?
No. I mean, thank you, Taylan. It's a really great presentation. I guess I'm curious for, I guess, in terms of this group, in terms of what are the sort of what are the hardest things currently to support your communities with in the current context, I guess, in the work that you do, because there's so much that you do, I suppose, in terms of direct service delivery and supporting residents who are struggling with some of those intersecting difficulties that you explained that families were experiencing in the community. What are the kind of most pressing gaps do you feel that are hardest to draw in resources and make connections? Like, are there partnerships or collaborations or pathways of support that you would like to see strengthened for the communities that you work with, kind of based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's again, it's a whole host of questions, Jenny, and important ones at that too as well. Firstly, to start from communities, we have a settled community, and even though there has been shifts to North London, there is still a sizable community. I don't know, for example, if the migration of the community sector is reflective of the migration of the population. But in any case, there is an aging population here. You know, older people services, women's services, and still education-related young people services are very much community needs that are there. I mean, community provision is one aspect of it, and unfortunately, community provision, community sector, Turkish Kurdish, Turkish Cypriot community sector has lost a lot of capacity over the last 10-15 years. They were impacted by what all organizations were impacted, what the population was impacted, and there has also been a certain churn, a change in the local public sector stuff as well. So in terms of, I think, our capacity, arguably capacity for providing culturally sensitive services for these communities is maybe at an all-time low. There is a much need for specialist services, as I was saying, for these what used to be called hard to reach, but I think they're called easily ignored communities now. Yeah, for them too. In terms of the charity sector as well, there is a certain workforce development issue in terms of getting involved in charity or the community sector, or even in the statutory sector. There is a problem in terms of involvement of the communities of the second generations in community services, whether in the voluntary or the statutory sector. But yeah, I mean, having given that general picture, to talk from our services, welfare advice, immigration, housing support related advice, practical support to deal with community needs in an accessible way is important. For example, I don't know any other organization, Turkish, Kurdish, and maybe even otherwise, that operates a drop-in service. But it's still important to have an open door, for the communities, that they can, drop in and access services, as well as, connecting with communities. So in terms of resourcing community provision that is outside of services that deal with short term, that's also an issue as well. And these are some of the things, Jenny, that pop into my mind. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, did anyone else have any other questions? There must be some thoughts, but maybe we'll if there aren't any, we'll move along. I hope you'll stay with us, Taylan. We usually open up the floor and there's lots of kind of rich information shared. I don't know whether people have things that they want to.
No, I wanted to join the meeting even before I learned that I was doing a presentation. So, all good, and,
Great.
I'll make up for the times I've missed it. Thank you.
Great to have you. Laura says no questions, but thank you for the information. It's great. And Molly, did you have your hand up? Was that a mistake, or did you want to come in? You're accidental. Well, you're very welcome to come in and talk about what Groundwork's up to. And I mean, we love to. So at this stage of the meeting, after any kind of more formal presentations, thank you so much, Taylan. I think your presentation was so rich in information, Taylan, that you haven't given any room for questions. So that's what I'm taking from it, and I'm sure we'll be able to include it within the newsletter if you're willing for us to share it, and we can point Johnny points to what's in there. It'll be a course that I'm sure that. Yes, great. Okay, Molly, I think you can jump straight in, and then maybe we'll come to Isabel, and then anyone else who wants to talk about what their service is up to, or projects and programs, or asks from the group, or anything that might be going on. Hi, Molly.
Hello, thank you so much for that presentation. It was super interesting, and the context is really helpful to understand all of that background, so thank you. So I've asked to talk about a couple of two projects about community resilience in the face of climate change. So basically we know that when there's something happens, if you think about your own life and your own work and the reason you're here, if there was a flood down the road, you would respond in some way as much as you are resourced to, and it's appropriate for you to do so. The community is going to respond to situations. We're obviously living in a time when we're going to have many more emergencies due to climate change, and we want to support people in our community to be more resilient, and that means building that capacity and building on that natural urge to respond by supporting them with the right information, the right tools, and the ability to prepare and plan for potential emergencies. So I'm from Groundwork London, which is a social environmental charity, and I've been working with colleagues from another Groundwork organisation who focus on community resilience and on a GLA-funded project, so two different GLA-funded projects, but on the same theme. So the first one is climate. First one is the Community Resilience Toolkit. Sorry, I have not prepared. I don't know if you've noticed. The London Community Resilience Toolkit, which is a document that's there for you, for your organisation, for your group, for your community, to help you prepare for threats from climate change and also other threats. There's lots of information. It's kind of there for you to explore and use as you see fit. I'll paste it in the chat. And the key thing is that it's kind of designed for any kind of community group to engage with. We're aware that there's still barriers around languages, and that's something that hopefully will be looked into in the next year because it's only in English at the moment. But that's definitely there. If you're interested in thinking about what would we do if there was a flood in down our road on our venue, how do we prepare for the impact of a heat wave on some of our most vulnerable members in our community. And the second thing is obviously you can read something, but that's not the same thing as doing something. And so we're looking for a network to create a network of community representatives. So that could be people who volunteer, that could be community members, that could be people who work in organisations, who are able to come along to training on specific hazards, so things like heat and flooding, and build a network where they take community action, practical action on climate change. So if you're planning on thinking about creating a community emergency plan, if you're planning ahead thinking about these people in members of our community in temporary housing, they really do need better fans and better support if there's a heat wave, then this is a great network for you to join, because you'll get support, training, and become part of a pan-London network. We're really keen always to hear more from different communities and to really represent the diversity of experience. A slight little hint from someone who's on the scoring panel: we're very keen to hear more from deaf and disabled organisations, or deaf and disabled people who are kind of working or volunteering or doing community work in that area. So if you're keen to get involved, come forward. There's a small bursary to take part if that's important for you, if that's needed. And yeah, so I'll just paste that in the chat as well. So sorry that's a bit rambly, but thank you very much for the opportunity to share that.
Thanks, Molly. And I can include, if you want to send me, I've got you put the 2 links in the chat. Great. I can include them in the newsletter if that's helpful as well. Jenny, did Isabel want to introduce herself? Do you want to come in at this point, Isabel?
Yeah, is now a good time, Isabel?
Yeah, absolutely fine. So I don't know how much you want me to say, really. I've just joined the comms team last week as a comms officer, so my role is quite general. It's kind of like working across loads of different areas, one of which is with the voluntary and charity sector. I was, for 3 years before that, a local journalist, working first as a community reporter and then more as a general reporter and video journalist. So I've got a lot of experience with voluntary and charity organisations, working in the community, telling community stories, working to help people with their campaigns as well. So yeah, I'm very experienced in that area. So if you guys ever need any help, also approaching the press about stuff, also I've got a lot of experience in that. Sometimes I know that people have opinions about the media, but often that is the mainstream media. The local media is obviously very different, and they can help with any campaigns usually that organisations have, like the voluntary sector. So what I'm working on with the council, though, at the moment is the voluntary and charity sector strategy that the council's set out over the next year. And one of the things I'm going to be doing over like maybe the next 6 months is filming videos with different organisations, profiling them. So yeah, I don't know if that's kind of been said to you guys yet, but if you wanted to know more about that, if you'd be interested in kind of finding out what our aims are for that, but also like you would have to get something out of it as well. Profiling your organisation and like the work you do on social media can be obviously really beneficial, because sometimes groups need volunteers and they're not getting a lot of uptake of that, or they need donations, or they just need people like that presentation, Taylan, that basically just educates people about like who you guys are in different communities. And yeah, I feel like there's loads of different aims that you're all probably trying to achieve that might be different.
Yeah, and I guess it might be useful to say that I guess, you know, this is part of our recognition as a council that there's just a lot less, that the voluntary sector and all of our frontline services are in a position where they're having to do a lot more, and as Taylan talked about, a lot more complexity to deal with, to work with in terms of, and what Molly's talking about, complexity in terms of the climate emergency, the kind of the complexity of the problems that we're seeking to solve, and the amount of money around to actually commission stuff. And as Taylan talked about, there's a lot less capacity because there's a lot less funding, and that's been over a long period of time with austerity and all of the impacts on the voluntary and community sector. So our voluntary and community sector strategy that Claire Whitney, who actually had to just jump off for a call but may join us shortly to come back, and she can speak to anyone a bit more about it. But really, the voluntary and community sector strategy is saying that there is a real commitment from the council to working differently with the sector, recognising the really critical role that all of you play supporting residents, and recognising that the council support may not only be financial. Given that there's less money around, the support needs to be more sharing of resources and tools. And I suppose this session has been one of the ways that we've been, working since the pandemic, these types of ways of kind of sharing the sorts of offers that Isabel made there about, how we can use the expertise within the council through our system convening work and through all these different initiatives. Taylan mentioned the council tax pilot. There's lots of different ways that our team and lots of other bits of the council have been sort of trying to work out how we can do more with less to support the sector, given how important we know you are, given the fact we need and want to work with you, as Taylan's pointed out, the specialist sort of experience support that organisations rooted in communities like Taylan are able to provide is really, the council can never reach those places, but equally neither can those community organisations. So I suppose it's that real ethos around, we do need to work differently and we do need to work together, but it's not easy, and involves kind of new ways of working. And I suppose through the videos, we're really hoping, and I guess we wanted to have that conversation here because Isabel and I were chatting the other day about this, and it's really important to us as a council that that the story we tell through these videos really represents the voices of the voluntary and community sector and what's important to them, and that it provides, as Isabel pointed out, an opportunity for you to promote what you're doing. So I know Mimi, I know that the Congolese Women's Organisation are looking for a space currently to provide services from, and I know that you're working with libraries and other colleagues through the community power work. So there's lots of amazing stories that we know that our colleagues in the voluntary sector and communities have got to tell, and this is an opportunity to sort of tell the story in the way that works for the sector, and we really want to kind of co-design that with you, I guess. And Isabel's it's great to have you on board, Isabel, so that we can kind of do that in partnership, and we can keep having conversations in this group if there are partners here that want to think about that. But we're also obviously we've been working with a lot of you in lots of different ways, so we're really sort of reflecting on all that learning now and thinking, okay, how do we what's the best place to start in terms of telling that story? So I don't know if anyone is brave enough. I know we're still recording, and maybe you don't want to put your cameras on and speak while the recording's on, so we could turn it off for the forum discussion. But I don't know if anyone wanted to had any thoughts on this idea of having some video profiles to sort of that the council can send out via our social media channels that promote your campaigns and the ways that you're working and what you want to say about the work that you do. Don't know if Taylan wanted to come back in, or Mimi or Molly. I'm picking those that I know a bit better. I think Lucy also. I don't know, Taylan, if any kind of thoughts in terms of what really is it the most important in terms of, I don't know if you've seen there was a campaign, I don't know if anyone has seen that it was that the comms team did around the shops, wasn't it, profiling different small businesses and shops in Hackney to promote local businesses. So I guess the idea is the campaign would be similar. So those shops were profiled to be able to promote, shopping locally and spending your money locally. So I guess it's that kind of, how we're using our reach and our networks to be able to promote what you do, recognizing that can be useful for drawing in extra funding or crowdfunding or promoting campaigns or raising awareness, or depending on those organizations' missions. But we will, you know, we'll come back to this group because we wanted to have this conversation in the open, because what we don't want it to feel like, and what it certainly can't do, is make it look like the council's, you know, using the voluntary sector to make itself look good when actually, you know, that support isn't there. We want to tell the actual, we want to tell an authentic story for how it is for organisations that really tell the story about what's important in the way we work moving forward for residents. So I guess it's that focus on, you know, Hackney residents. And I think that Taylan, your presentation brought that to life beautifully, because you're looking at all aspects of a resident's experience in Hackney in the service that you provide. And I guess this group has always been, how can we work together to support residents more effectively? What do we need to do to get past, you know, all those tensions in those relationships and actually move forward with the kind of action that really makes a difference? But Taylan, come in. Thank you.
A very generic comment, and if it's going to sound too, I don't know, generic and too dry, do excuse me, but I think these are issues, Jenny, of facilitating democracy, you know. So in a very counterintuitive way, what I will say is that council needs more resources and more staffing. For example, again, we don't, it's not that I have a nostalgia about, you know, past service delivery, because it wasn't perfect, but there was resources and staff that enabled both community organizations and at times, you know, hence the community's input into strategic discussions, you know, boards, committees that can mirror the work that is being going on, but having the capacity to enable that engagement. I think that's one of the issues. For example, again, this depends on your take on, you know, how local democracy can be. For example, facilitating local assemblies and getting those assemblies to be binding in a certain way as well. I don't want to create a whole you know, argument about the political attitude of the local council to Whitehall. But for example, in terms of this council deficit that exists, that impacts all of our work. It does. But the council's attitude to that is a political one, you know. It's a political choice. It's not that you know, this can or that can happen. It's not, for example, underpinned by local assemblies, local community input. It's a cabinet decision, isn't it? You know, maybe picking a fight. You know, I shouldn't be saying this. Yeah, maybe picking good fights, you know, backed up by good local democracy, might be a way to go forward. I saved that diplomatically.
Yeah. No, it's really useful. I mean, we, you know, this space is an open space. We do record it, but this is you know, we really want to hear what's happening on the ground and how all these things that are happening around us are impacting on service delivery. You know, this stuff's really important. So Taylan, you know, it's really good to hear that. And you know, Isabel coming in, you know, new to Hackney Council and new to this work, it's just really useful. We really wanted Isabel to be connected into the voice of partners who we work with and hear some of these and lots of other things day to day. So yeah, do come in.
Yeah, you got me going, Jenny. Sorry, you know, for example, you know, one of the things as a social welfare advice provider and as an organization, you know, I think most organizations around the table that deal with certain aspects of it. The spring budget is due to hit, according to the Resolution Foundation, up to 1 million people, you know. And interestingly, not only this is going to create more demand for services, yeah, and this is going to be accompanied with cuts in, for example, Ministry of Justice, local advice funding, etc. I mean, forget doing something about it and not to burden you with more work, but, you know, to have a Hackney impact assessment of the likely outcome of government's new welfare reform on Hackney. That will be something really good to, you know, shape our work, but also shape our collaboration as well, wouldn't it? You know, but I know I mean, I'm sharing it, but I know there won't be any resource for that because well, we are good partners. We know each other's problems and troubles, don't we? You know, so yeah, there we are.
And I think, I mean, you're so right that these the changes that you're talking about are happening day to day and so rapidly, aren't they, that we're having to adapt to. And I guess I was thinking back to the pandemic. You mentioned the earthquake in Turkey, Molly, you know, in terms of the community resilience, you know, we are in new times now, where when crisis hits, that adaptability, the ability of a system to respond to that is only as strong, I think, as its relationships, actually, because I think that was something that, going right back to the humanitarian response in the pandemic, was a real game changer for the way that the council recognised it needed to work with the sector. I mean, it was set out in our voluntary sector strategy before that, but I know how my colleague Claire articulated that it really came to life in the pandemic. Actually, the pandemic evidenced the need for those ways of working, and essentially that's, you know, the strategy. Those things haven't changed, but we have tried out more things that have proven even more so the need to work in those ways, given all of the things you say, Taylan, that those impacts are so intersectional and complex that we can't rely on one section of data or impact. You know, this is really and again, whatever assessment or, you know, whatever piece of work the council or is led on the voluntary sector, the more we're collaborating, I think, across the piece in understanding the impact and the live insight, the more we can adapt and make the right decisions with those limited resources. Because I think you're right. We're all experiencing the hit, just as residents are, as you know, point out. It's a knock, you know, it's all the way through the system, isn't it? So yeah, and I wondered, I know I've got Mimi on the call, and I know that yeah, we've been working with Mimi and Lucy Richardson. Is that Lucy from Hackney Quest? I don't know if anyone else wanted to talk about either this or anything else that they wanted to share with others on the call. I did want to use some time to share with you some of the I guess share with you a sort of set of principles we've been working that's really been developed through this work, through the learning that I described, the learning journey we've been on really since the pandemic, and in conversation with all of our partners who've been working with residents who are struggling. And our team, John, who's on the call, some of you might know Charlie, Hannah, we've got Chanel, Maddie, who's on the call, Rachel Salmon, and Abby Halver, who I think some of you may know as well. We've been working with colleagues across the system and through the Household Support Fund and through this session to co-design and sort of pilot a number of ways of working that have really been in response to needs arising. And we've tried to write up some of these stories so that they can provide kind of case study examples of some of the ways of working that we feel are really helping us to do a bit more with less through relational ways of working. And I wanted to share with you, since you have been absolutely critical or in sort of developing these, I wanted to share with you where we've got to. It's not a brilliant, and share with you some of the principles that we've drawn up relating to this. We are actually looking to rebrand this session using those visual products. And so we want to show you specifically the page, the case study that's actually about the tools session. And I'm just trying to find I've got it up on my screen, but somehow it's not letting me share it. Sorry about this, I don't know. I can't seem to find, yes I can, here we go, sorry. We are, so we have also done, we actually also created a film. Some of you may have come to the tools live sessions. So this is a page in the zine that we put together, which is a kind of case study pack. And these are the principles that I hope you can see. It's quite small. You might want to try and zoom in. And I guess these principles are things that we reflected on having learnt about in our team through all of our work with communities. And that's in terms of the way that your organisations work with people, but also the way that we have found it works better when we work with you or with any of our kind of key stakeholders when we're trying to solve some of these challenging problems. So if I go through those, and I'd really love to hear from anyone about how these might resonate with you, and any thoughts you might have, ideas you might have on how we could use them or how you might want to use them to help embed some of these ways of working. So I guess the first principle is all around putting people first. We've heard a lot about, really, resident focused services, and recognizing that people with different experiences in different communities and may require and experiences of racism and discrimination may require a kind of more culturally sensitive or appropriate service, or at least one that's well connected to services that can meet those needs, so that we're really providing that holistic support. Teaming up, working together with community groups and organisations to find solutions. We're working with lots of council services who are trying to work in these ways, and it's not easy. It requires quite a change in the way that we work. Again, adapting and learning. So I think that last part of the discussion really highlighted how important it's been throughout all of these crises, whether it's cost of living or the pandemic or the earthquake that affected so many people in the Turkish community so horrifically, that actually being flexible and changing the approach when needed and seeking a kind of wider group of people to solve that problem with is always going to be more effective and less resource intensive. Building trust, starting with trust, has been really one of the most, and moving at the pace of trust in this work has been one of the most important learnings for us, I think, and is something we heard over the last 3 years in this session from almost every frontline worker or resident-facing worker. Is so critical in the work with residents who may be experiencing complex intersecting needs and difficulties that might require different services, is that building that trusted relationship where someone can feel heard and understood and seen, but also building those trusted relationships with others across the system so that we can support them better rather than telling them different things or signposting them off in different directions. And again, sharing knowledge and staying curious. We don't have all the answers. The council may have in the past commissioned in a kind of command and control expert model, but we do recognise that actually in our work with communities and to support those who are most vulnerable, we can't do it without the voluntary sector, because we know that you're rooted in communities and you have those relationships that we don't have with those that won't necessarily come to us. So as part of our commitments to tackling poverty and inequalities, we must prioritise working with you, whatever that takes in terms of the time and resource, in order to connect up the dots and to make it possible for residents to access the most timely support so that things don't get worse for them. I will just show you the next. So the next page is actually the tools session write-up. Oops, sorry, it's not. So this is actually our introduction. Is it going to let me move along now? I can't actually work out how it lets you move along. So rubbish at all this tech still. Okay, so this is the zine. We haven't yet finished it off, but we really wanted to share it with you, because what we don't want is for this to be a surprise and for you to think, where's this come from? Actually, this is all your I guess this is what we've done with these sessions, where all of the times that we've been working with you on these different projects, we've kind of brought this back together and gone, okay, well, what are our advice providers saying? What is our food network partners saying? What are our community infrastructure partners saying? How is all this coming together? What are the themes between them? And so this is a kind of pack really where we're trying to tell the stories of these fairer ways of working so we can share learning, because our team is funded by short-term funding through poverty reduction, some health funding, and some other funding through the Household Support Fund. But this work is really prototyping some of these ways of working that other services could use. And this kind of might act as a bit of a toolkit. So we want to make sure that you all feel, comfortable with how this is being presented. And if you've got ideas about how we could do this, we'd really like to work with you on it. And this is the final one I'll share with you. I would like to include a link to it in the newsletter, John, but if we make it clear, it's not finalised and finished. But I really wanted this group to be the first to have sight of it in a formal way, because it's been so key in and also those that have collaborated on all the other pieces of work. So if I can zoom in I don't know if I can zoom in a little bit. Can everyone else zoom in on that? I'll essentially, it's really telling the story of this tools session, which I started talking about at the very beginning of this meeting, which was that when it was real cost of living crisis, energy bills were going through the roof and nobody knew how to get the most relevant information for residents. John and I just opened up this meeting online and just invited every partner that we've been in touch with and through the community partners mailing list, the Advice Network, and we set this meeting up just as a fortnightly session and invited in the different services that knew about the different pots of money and the different changes that were going to affect residents, so that that information would get out as quickly as possible, because we kept hearing that by the time we published it anywhere, it was out of date. So I think it was probably, I think the first meeting we might have had 120 people, didn't we, John? We had really high numbers in that first period. And then it settled down a bit. And then we've had a really steady flow. There hasn't been less than about 20 people for quite some time, has there, John? And for some periods, we can be up to 40, 50 people through this meeting. And I think the mailing list is now about 1,000 frontline staff across the system, isn't it, John, or near there? Although we're working on a rebrand where it makes it easier to sign up, and where the newsletter and this session can really act as a bit of a network. So we really would love to develop that with you, and we'll keep coming back and talking about it with you, mainly so we can say, if anyone does want to give any steer for where this goes, or work with us on this, or even use some of the visuals to talk about your involvement in this work, then do get in touch with us, because we see these resources as system resources. They don't belong to the council, they belong to the system because they've been developed with the system. The case studies really provide some great ways of thinking about how we can solve problems differently if we fund organisations differently. So, for example, Taylan mentioned the council tax pilot that we're working on with Neil Clark in Revenues and Benefits. Now, Neil has been attending this session for quite some time now, and was really reflective after one of the sessions about how important the relationships of trust that community-based organisations like Day-Mer provide to Hackney residents, but also how impossible it is for us as a council to collect council tax that's owing to us without building those relationships, because the data we hold on residents is not always giving us the full story of what's going on for them. Whereas Taylan's welfare advice workers will understand the complex needs that resident has, and we're working. So John's been working with Neil. We will do a sort of proper feature in this session, but I don't know if you want to come in, John, and sort of tell the next bit of that story, because you've taken that forward. And I guess by working in a group on that problem of like the voluntary sector saying we're working with loads of people who are in debt to the council and who don't want to get in touch, and I'm worried about them getting evicted because they're putting their head in the sand and they don't trust you and they won't listen to me. And then we've got the council tax team going, I don't know how we're going to collect this money. You know, the voluntary sector could help us we'd be up for doing a payment plan if only we knew which residents needed it. But if we can trust the people who come to your tools session or the people in your advice network, you know, if you've got some trusted partners that you know are working with residents and can make a judgment on that, then we may be able to come to some arrangement via an escalation route. So this is something we're going to be talking about more here as things start to evolve. But I'd love to bring John in and sort of fill in the gaps on the bits of, what have you done? What process did you take on that piece of work?
Well, like you said, it came out of the tool session, so it was really trying to, I guess, reach out to as many partners as possible to see who wanted to be involved, and then it was about bringing those partners together with the relevant teams at the council. And it's been, I guess, quite long-term work in building those relationships. It takes time for people to get to know each other and to understand each other's motivations and aims and why this work matters to them. But through building that foundation, I guess we've ended up with some real practical outcomes. So we did some training a couple of months ago for the voluntary sector around council tax, which was really well received, I think. So that, and it was delivered with members of the voluntary sector as well. So it was a real sort of team effort. And at the moment, we're in the process of organising a community money clinic, again, sort of being designed and facilitated by partners and council colleagues. And we are also in the process of setting up that escalation route that you mentioned, Jenny, around the council tax inquiries, which is hopefully going to get voluntary sector partners quicker and fuller responses to their inquiries when they're working with a resident who's sort of in a sticky situation, and maybe it's a particularly complex case or a vulnerable resident. We're trying to design a way for those inquiries to be dealt with quicker and by the right people. So yeah, it's kind of like I said, being quite a long-term piece of work in building those relationships, but then it is actually leading to hopefully some practical and useful outcomes. So yeah, watch this space.
Brilliant, thank you, John. And you'll see within that, I was just going to put a link to the zine for anyone who is interested. We will promote and launch it properly as soon as it's finished, and we are looking at setting up a microsite so that we can host some of these resources on, and I guess continue to develop ideas in this space about how we can work more effectively to support what you're doing with the limited resources we have, by bringing things together, I guess, and that sharing. I don't know. I don't know if anyone had any questions on that. It was quite a lot. I mean, I can definitely talk more in a small group to anyone who would like to get into the sort of detail of any of that a bit more, but appreciate your capacity is very stretched, and just hope hope some of those things feel useful. John?
I was going to come in with something different, but I don't know if I was actually, just before potentially we wrap up, the government, the Home Office, has announced its funding for advocacy organisations around Windrush compensation. So they've got a £1.5 million fund being delivered over 3 years. So any organisation that works with communities affected by the Windrush scandal, any organisation that supports residents to make claims for compensation, you would be able to make an application to the funds. However, the deadline is 9th of May at 5 p.m. and they've only really just announced it in the last week. So insane way to deliver such an important piece of funding and work, but it's there, but it's quite a tight deadline. So I will I've already reached out to a few organisations who I know do that work, but if there's anyone, obviously, that I will have obviously missed people. So if it does feel like it's relevant for you, then I'm going to put the info in the newsletter and you can have the link to make an application. But I just wanted to make sure I said that before we close.
Brilliant, thanks, John. Yeah, anyone want to come in on any of the stuff that I was sharing, or on on John's call to action on the very tight deadline on the Windrush piece? No? Or anything else? I think we should probably wrap up, because it feels like everyone's run out of steam, quite understandably, before the bank holiday. And thank you so much, Taylan, for joining us and for such a brilliant presentation. We really appreciate your time. And and looking forward to working with you all moving forward after a good rest, hopefully after this long weekend. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Isabel, for joining us. And
Thank you.
Thanks, Mimi. Thanks, Paulette.
Sunshiny days all. See you.
See you all. Thanks a lot. Have a great bank holiday. Bye.